Good morning, my name is Jolene Gardy, and I'm a board member at the League of Women Voters of the Red River Valley. I'd like to welcome everyone to the fourth of 4 forums for Fargo area legislators. I'd like to thank the legislators for being here on their Saturday morning with us. I'd also like to thank the City of Fargo for allowing us to hold the forum here in Cable 1. The forum will be broadcast live on Public Access Channel, and the video will also be posted on the League website at a later date. The forum is sponsored by the League of Women Voters. The League is a nonpartisan national organization that encourages informed and active citizen participation in government, with an emphasis on educating citizens. Membership is open to all individuals. For the audience, if you have a question, please write it on the white note cards being handed out by Del Rey and Bev. Please do make sure to ask a question, and if you can, if it's a particular bill or if you could be specific, that will help us. We may not have a chance to cover everything, but we'll get through as many questions as we can. We're going to start with 2-minute openings and then have 2 minutes for each answer. We're going to take a short break at about 10:25 as well. You can also direct a question to a specific legislator. We will give everyone the chance to answer it as well, and we'll rotate through so Josh doesn't have to start every time. If you have a follow-up question as we're answering something, you can submit it, and depending on how many questions we have, hopefully we can get back to it. So, any questions before we begin? Okay, we'll start with Representative Boucher for your opening statement. Thank you.
Thank you, Jolene, and thanks to the League for sponsoring these opportunities for us to visit with constituents. My name is Josh Boucher. I represent District 44 in the House, which is mostly North Fargo. This is my first session, so it's been definitely a learning experience as a freshman legislator. I think there's a lot of energy in the chamber. There's a lot of topics that folks have been, of course, we're getting to the end of the session, so there's a lot of things that have been resolved or not resolved, and so I continue to look at this with an open mind and learn as much as I can as I move forward. I did introduce a few pieces of legislation that unfortunately did not continue forward. They died on the floor, but we continue to work on a variety of other issues such as early childhood education and child care issues throughout the state is one of the primary focuses I'll be working on as we continue the rest of the session.
Thank you. Representative Carlson.
Well, thank you for having us today. There's lots of things that have happened in the legislature, obviously, up to this point in time. We're kind of in the middle of the second period, and that's when we get all the Senate bills and they get our bills, but the real time comes when we get into conference committees, which will start in about, 2 weeks or so. We'll start trying to reconcile the differences. We started out with some main goals. The first one was to make sure that we funded the priorities that we had to fund. The second one was that we wanted to return some of the surplus that we happen to enjoy back to the taxpayers. And the third one was that we build a strong reserve. I think we're on track to do all three of those things. We are putting $4 billion into infrastructure in this budget across the state, not just in the western part of the state, but throughout the state. We're returning, in the House version, is $1.2 billion to the taxpayers in various forms of tax relief, including property, personal income, and corporate income. And we're going to have an ending fund balance that is not real large, but we have a budget stabilization fund that will be almost $700 million. So things are on track. We're here. It's better that we come and listen and answer questions. So that's kind of a summary of where we're at this point in time.
Thank you. Representative Gugelsberg.
Thank you, and thanks to the League of Women Voters for putting this on. We've been having some good discussions lately in the House about how's this way the legislature working? Should we have more days? Should we start meeting annually? And it makes you kind of think about it. And sometimes I think that South Dakota might be onto something. They meet Monday through Thursday, and then on Fridays they go home to talk to their constituents. It seems like in North Dakota sometimes we get out to Bismarck, we're there all week, and we're surrounded by nothing but each other and lobbyists and other special interest groups, and we forget who sent us out there. We go around during the elections and we knock on everybody's door and ask for their vote, ask to be their proxy in Bismarck, and then I don't think we get enough time to come back and talk to the people during the session, but that's why these are good. Again, my name is Ron Gugesberg from District 11 in South Fargo. It's my second session. My first session on the Appropriations Committee, which is very interesting, digging into the budget of the state and learning how all different parts of the state government work and dealing with tax policy. So it's a lot better, and I look forward to our discussion.
Thank you. Representative Koppelman.
Thank you. My name is Ben Koppelman. I represent District 16, which is in parts of Fargo and West Fargo. Thank you, Jolene and the League, for hosting us today. I have enjoyed the first half of my first session out in Bismarck. I serve on the Government and Veterans Affairs Committee as well as the Education Committee. And we've been wrangling with some pretty big issues in education as far as restructuring the entire funding formula for both K-12 as well as higher ed. We've tackled some other issues that have to do with pre-K and other, the way we fund for population growth as we see increasing in West Fargo and Fargo as student population. In other issues, we've been looking a lot at tax relief. And I'm pretty proud of the package that the House passed out, and we're vetting the package the Senate sent to us, and I think we'll come up with a very good tax relief package. And I sure appreciate all of you for being here, and look forward to your questions.
Thank you. Senator Barry.
Is that on? Okay, thank you. Senator Spencer Berry, District 27 in South Fargo. This is my second session in the legislature. And again, just a thanks to the League for putting this on. It's always nice to have a chance to come back and talk to constituents and other folks in the community and answer any questions and concerns. And it's been echoed on the panel already, the fact that getting input from our constituents is a very important part of what we do, obviously. We represent you in Bismarck. And so, again, fundamental policies that we're hearing out, obviously this session has been, by definition, somewhat historic as it relates to the changes that have occurred in this state, with agriculture still being our number one source as our number one generator, I guess, of income for the state. Energy has come on strong and obviously has put the state in a unique position to try to make sure that we very carefully harvest this wonderful gift that's been given to the state and use things both for now and in the future. That's the most important part about this. And so establishing good public policy, I guess that's the way I view things when I'm in Bismarck, is what can we do? What is the state's interest in setting forth good public policy to help our citizens? So as Representative Carlson mentioned, funding priorities, returning money to the taxpayers, and in this particular situation, I know last session it was a record of about $500 million that was returned to the taxpayers. In this session, it's going to be in excess of $1 billion. So that'll be $1.5 billion over 2 sessions that will be returned to the taxpayers. And also setting aside money for the future, such as the Legacy Fund and others. So again, I look forward to the questions. Our goal is to keep North Dakota moving forward. We are, in fact, a world-class state. And the face that we present to this nation and to the world at large is something that we have an opportunity to do. And I think as we move forward, you'll see that. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Nelson.
Thank you, Ms. Jolene. I'm so used to saying Mr. Chairman that I apologize. My name is Carolyn Nelson. I'm the senator from this district, District 21. We run from about 13th Avenue South to 12th Avenue North and the river to I-29. I have represented that area of town for the last 12 sessions, 10 sessions in the Senate, and all 10 sessions on judiciary, 11 sessions on what is now known as Government and Veterans Affairs. We've had about 900 bills out there. So when you come at us and say, what about bill number blah, 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 and we say, and what is it? Because there's no way we can remember what all those things do. Maybe the bills that we sponsor, we can remember the numbers, or those that we get 150 emails on, we can remember the numbers, but please tell us what it is that you're asking us about when you ask questions. Dr. Berry and I serve all day, all week on the same committees. And they're, as I said, what they were. And we have had 900 bills, and in those committees, we've had 200 of them. Now, there's 8 other committees plus appropriations, so we could make a case that we're overworked out there. And there's some people maybe should get their the asset allocation changed, right? But I'm looking forward to your questions, and thank you very much for being here.
All right, thank you. The first question will go to Representative Carlson, and it's a question regarding higher education. It states, higher education is a mess. Do you support Senate Bill 2200, the funding reform bill that adds transparency?
Figure out. I've read through the bill. It's in committee at this point in time. They had a joint hearing of both the House Education Committee and the Senate and the House Appropriations and the Education Committee. And the bill changes the funding formula, and it's been no secret for years that you come home and find out that when they look at the formula, I see Mr. Bjerke here for a year, worked at NDSU, and with the old formula, it was kind of everybody got so much money, and when you really looked at the kids in the classes and the people sitting in the chairs, NDSU, for example, was underfunded. So we'd come home and we thought what we did was give a lump sum of money and it was going to be really good and everybody was going to be equally treated. And when we got all done, they came home and said, you know, it wasn't a very fair formula. So 2200, it tries to address actual class hours and people being in the seats at those campuses. I hope that, that some version of that comes out of there. I honestly don't know what the committee's going to do with it today. But we need to address getting a more fair formula for how they fund these kids on these campuses and what's equitable. And it's not an easy task. Anybody tells you can just all of a sudden overnight switch. There's $22 million in it for hold harmless payments because we have campuses losing kids. And how do you handle that? So that bill is in committee. I don't know for sure if it'll come out in the same version or not. But we're going to take a good look at it to try and make sure we get that equity issue amongst the campuses handled.
Thank you. Representative Guggenberg.
Thank you. Being in the House, I haven't heard it or seen the bill yet, and it hasn't had a hearing in our full appropriations committee. But from what I understand, it is going to be a more fair funding system and should be something that we support here in Fargo. As far as other higher education issues, there's some bills to change how the higher ed board is made up, and it will go to a vote of the people, and the people will decide how it's essentially done. I'm just very concerned that you know, the way our system is set up now tries to keep politics out of it, and by changing that system, I'm afraid that getting even more politics involved in our higher education system is going to affect the research we do in our state and how our students are being taught. So, like I said, that's something we're going to have as a discussion as a state, but it doesn't sound like a good idea to me so far.
Thank you. Representative Koppelman.
Thank you. Senate Bill 2200, although it was heard jointly between the House Education and then the Education section of the Appropriations section is actually handling the bill in terms of evaluating what should be done with the bill, if there's anything to correct and that sort of thing. But in a general sense, I think there's some merits to the bill where it allows the student hours to be calculated in. I think it might be a better formula on how to divide the total dollars. I have some questions whether or not the dollars in there are the right amounts and what we should do with that, if anything, to adjust those. But in higher ed in general, one of the things that has concerned me this session is seeing what the costs of tuition have done over, let's say, a 10-year period of time, and what the costs or the amount of money that the legislature has put into higher education, both of which have gone up, both the appropriation as well as the tuition, and yet the student population has gone up by a lot smaller amount than the dollars to educate the kids. So I think we need to find a balance in that. It might require some reform, and it might not be something we can do all this session, but I think we're looking in the right direction.
Thank you. Senator Berry.
Yes, well, as it relates to higher ed, what I have found in the 2 short sessions that I've been in Bismarck is that it's basically, higher ed is the soap opera It's kind of an as the world turns situation. There's always something going on. We have a lot of folks that are very involved. Some have been involved for a long time, and I know on the Senate side we have several senators that, again, quite involved with this process, and they're very good folks that understand this system. They've seen the changes throughout the years. And many of them support these current changes, and basically, Representative Carlson brought up earlier, I think it's very important to note, it's like looking at 3 periods to a hockey game. We start out with bills on the House side and the Senate side, they cross over, and those that pass the House go to the Senate and vice versa. And after that session's done, then conference committee. And it's a conference committee, which we're grinding down to right now. That's where the rubber really hits the road as far as what will be determined, specifically in terms of dollar amounts that are going to be going out and what provisions are going to be placed in these bills. So as they go forward, transparency and accountability are something most people would say, yeah, right off the bat, that's something we want to know. That's a good thing. And so if you look at these programs and their path looking forward to success and helping the students out, changing that formula seems like they're on a good path. And I think as we move forward, that's going to be the key, is to try to stay between the white lines.
Thank you, Senator Nelson.
2200 passed the Senate 45-0, so obviously I voted for it. I think, though, there are those other things that were talked about with higher ed we need to look at. And quite frankly, I think we need to quit meddling in academic freedom. Just straight out. It's not our business. Those people were hired to teach, and they need to have the freedom to teach, and we shouldn't be tacking amendments on to bills saying that they can't do their research. I agree that the tuition needs to get looked at. I noticed there is a problem with there's a tuition bill somewhere about spouses and children, dependents of deceased veterans, that you're working on a bill to allow them to have the free tuition still, even though the veteran has died. There are a number of things out there that deal with education. I remember back in the days where we did have problems with political meddling with the Board of Higher Education. I've seen stronger boards of education. When they pass a resolution that says we have our full support and then the vote is 5-3, I find that a little bit amazing, but life is interesting out there. And I did vote for 2200.
Thank you. Next question, we'll start with Representative Koppelman. We have a large number of questions on the Fargo-Moorhead diversion. Where possible, I'm going to combine a couple of them, and we may go back through and ask a second round here. What is your position on the Fargo-Moorhead diversion and ensuring fair protection for Oxbow and rural Cass? And second, do you support the Carlson Amendment? Oh, I'm sorry, Josh. Thank you. You just interrupt me if I skip you, and if I promote you or demote you, it doesn't count either. So you just have to yell at me.
I'll be brief.
Thank you.
You know, when I'm not in the legislature, I work in higher education. I'm employed over at MSUM and was at NDSU for 8 years. So I'm glad that we have some legislation where we're trying to address the funding formulas. And NDSU has been an institution that's been negatively impacted by the old formula. So hopefully this, you know, with this new formula, it's going to help right some of those wrongs that we have an opportunity to fix those. I do find it interesting, you know, education is not cheap, and we have to find a variety of different ways to fund that, and we have our state appropriations, we have our students paying for it. We also have faculty and staff that are working very diligently to go get grants to help with the research that they do. And I think, as Senator Nelson said, I think it's very unfortunate when we start playing politics based on ideology of what we believe and what we don't believe, and what faculty can and can't research based on who they can partner with. And specifically, I'm talking about the amendments on Senate Bill 2368, which passed yesterday. The amendments passed Thursday. The bill passed yesterday afternoon. I think if we seriously want to talk about issues that face our society, it's our faculty that are out there that are doing the research to help find those solutions. And I think it's unfortunate that because this has to deal with Planned Parenthood, an organization that does not perform abortions in this state, you know, we've limited what those faculty can do as far as educating high-risk students, youth, on how to be sexually active appropriately, and hopefully abstain, if anything. So think it's a detriment when we're sitting here trying to find a solution to funding formulas, but then at the same time we limit what faculty can and can't do when they go get grants.
Thank you. My apologies. Okay, on to the Fargo-Moorhead diversion. What is your position on the Fargo-Moorhead diversion and ensuring fair protection for Oxbow and rural Cass? And then second, what is your position on the Carlson Amendment? And if you support it as a Fargo legislator, how can you justify jeopardizing flood protection for the city of Fargo?
Well, I'll try to get all those answered in 2 minutes. First of all, having run for election this November and being new to the legislature, I didn't have come into running for office with a position on the Fargo-Moorhead diversion and the specific working parts of it. So this whole process has been a learning process where I've gone and asked questions of those from Fargo city officials, Cass city officials, and said, okay, we know that some flood protection is needed. What is it going to be, and how's it going to work? And so as far as the diversion project, I think we need to find a solution that works for Fargo, as well as takes care of those in the rural areas like Oxbow and rural Cass. We need to deal with things like, school district funding and how those things change. If properties are devalued, we need to take care of our neighbors. Since I'm Fargo and West Fargo legislator, I got to think of what takes care of both interests as well. And so for the neighbors to the west in West Fargo, what works the best for them in terms of how that's put together. So what's my position on the FM diversion? I think we have to see what the final plan looks like before I can say for sure. But I think that the diversion's got merit. I think we just need to get the details worked out so that everybody's protected. On the second question I think you asked was, what's my position on the Carlson Amendment? And I'm sure Representative Carlson will have his opinions on that in a minute. But my position is a lot of the limitations that were in that amendment, I think there was some of them that need to be there. I personally have a problem with starting the diversion before all the funding is in place. As to some of the stuff having to do with ring dikes and house buyouts and stuff, I probably don't have enough information to have a final position on some of that sort of thing. So with that, I think I answered all your questions.
Thank you, Senator Barry.
And thank you. As it relates to the diversion, having been someone personally involved in that, I had a house that was bought out a couple of years ago that was based on the diversion and the plans thereof for mitigation for flood, which was, it was an important thing. I understood that was something that needed to be done as it relates to the greater good. That was just the way that worked out. One of the biggest things being involved in that and talking with some of the engineers that are in the chamber here today, this has been a moving target. From the time it's been announced and put on the boards and plans, we had folks from the FM area come out and present last session as to what the plans were. They came out and presented again this session, and things keep changing. It's a very dynamic situation, as you can imagine. Anytime you're involving dikes and where you're going to build, where you're going to divert water, where you're going to mitigate, it's going to involve different people's interests. And therefore, I think as Representative Koppelman said, as we get more information, we'll be able to tell you more about them. Now, do we want good flood control for Fargo? Obviously. We absolutely do. There's a lot of protection that's needed. Do we want to do it in the way that is obviously economically feasible? Yeah. I mean, right now there's about a $2 billion process that's out there with about $1.1 billion of funding. They're short a lot right now, and so trying to actually come up with and be able to tell us where you're going to get the money from to do this is going to be important. And so we're waiting for some of those answers before we can really give you a much better answer.
Thank you, Senator Nelson.
Well, I think in the next couple of weeks, I will have trucks in front of my house going beep, beep, beep in the middle of the night as they build a 14-foot dike down the middle of 2nd Street South. This is 4 times in the last 5 years. We have been unofficially notified that within 3 or 4 years, our apartment complex will be bought out and it will become the dike, part of the dike that protects downtown Fargo. Like Dr. Barry, it's something that has to be done. We can't let downtown Fargo flood. We'll lose medical services, we'll lose businesses, we'll lose the financial institutions, we'll lose the economic growth of Fargo. And so I guess I'm somewhat sympathetic with the folks north and south of town, but this is impacting people in the middle of town too. And I am for the diversion. I am for removing the Carlson Amendment. And it's in appropriations, I believe. It's House Bill 1020. We'll just have to see what they bring up. But right now, it's the Water Commission bill. Something has to be done to pass that out, but we just need to get the worst parts of it out. And I think that's the amendment.
Thank you, Representative Boucher.
Once again, as the other Fargo folks have said, we definitely support the diversion. And I think, whatever can be done to continue the conversation with our neighbors to the south to find a solution that's amicable. The nice thing is we still have the funding that's in the Water Commission bill right now is primarily for north side projects for the next 2 years. Once we get to those south side projects, that is more in the next session when we meet, and we'll have those conversations. So there's still opportunity, I think, for conversations with our friends to the south. And as Senator Nelson said, it's part of the Water Commission bill, and so it's not a separate funding for the diversion. It's part of the water projects throughout the state. So although we voted for it out of the House, the amendments were part of that, and so I would like to see those amendments removed. But I think the nice thing about the amendments is that it's continued the conversation, and it's interjected a different conversation within the greater conversation. So I think it's good that we're having that, and I think Representative Carlson has brought up some good points in regards to the funding and who puts funding first and how. But in the end, if we want to protect Fargo, we're going to have to fund the majority of that.
Thank you, Representative Carlson.
How many minutes do I have? Only 2? Well, what I'd like to tell you to begin with is this is a bigger topic that can't be solved in a 2-minute answer, and why and what's going to happen. So I'll be happy to stay afterwards and address any questions people have regarding the diversion and the amendments that are on the bill. And in regard, no matter what you've heard, I had nothing to do with all this snow and the fact that it might flood this year, because you seem to get blamed for anything else. But first of all, let me tell you what the role of the state is. The amendments try to address what the role of the state is in this project. We do not design the project. We do not say whether the project can be built or not built. But we can say that we want to know what's going to happen to the money that the state puts in. And that's what it addresses. For the last 2 bienniums, we've put aside $30 million in 07-09. We put $45 million forward in 09-11. And this budget has $100 million in it for flood protection in the valley. We are saying that you could go ahead. They've already spent, by the way, $35 million. $35.5 million have been spent towards various projects within the city of Fargo out of that $75 million. So we have already got a good start. A lot of the south side projects are already completed. Some of that paid for with state money. Now the amendments were, there was a mistake, 2 of them that I think that were in there that I should have caught that I didn't. A lot of them were the same language, by the way, that were put in the water bill last time. But one of them, when it said you couldn't use any public funds, was an error, because that was supposed to have been state funds. We have no intention to slow down what you do with the sales tax collected here. The second was that an amendment was added in conference committee that said that you could use half the value of the house buyouts to match the state dollars. That language was overstruck, and that language should be back in the bill, because if we've done it in the past, we should do it in the future. Now, there's much more to this issue. The question is, what is the state's commitment, and how long and when will that money be required, and at what level is our level of participation? The bill says $325 million. The city has come to us in the county saying, no, they need $450 million. Now, that's a decision the legislature has to make, whether they're willing to, over the next 4 bienniums, raise that money to $450 million. I'm sure there'll be more questions on this, but this is very hard to answer in a 2-minute period of time.
Thank you, Representative Guggisberg.
Thank you, and I think I've made it clear before that I absolutely support the diversion. It was interesting, the Fargo, West Fargo, Moorhead Chamber, I think I didn't say that in the right order, but anyway, came out last week and talked to us, and And somebody, I believe they were from West Fargo, asked about Plan B. What if the diversion doesn't happen? And the truth is, if the diversion doesn't happen, from what I'm told, our two choices are to ring dike the entire city, which I don't think is going to make our neighbors very, very happy, or only go to 42.5 feet. And at 42.5 feet, we're going to lose the city. So Plan B doesn't look too good. So we need to move forward with this diversion. You know, a lot of people on the panel have said they need more information, and we're waiting for more planning. We've been looking into this for a long time. The Army Corps are the experts in this. They've come up with a plan. They've come up with a plan that's reduced the number of homes affected up and down the river. I think they are the experts, and we need to go with their plan. As far as the Carlson amendments, as they're called, I voted against those in committee, and then I voted for the bill on the floor. And I've been criticized for voting for the bill on the floor, but the truth is I voted for a lot of bills on the floor that I wasn't 100% happy with. Should I have, and should we as Democrats have tried to work with Republicans to get these amendments off? Maybe. I've offered since then to meet with Representative Carlson and Senate Republicans as Democrats and try to work this issue out, and would still offer that. And I think we need to get those amendments removed, because this isn't a chicken and egg thing. We keep talking about it like this is well, which is first? The truth, if this language is in the bill, it's going to send a message to Washington that Fargo isn't interested in a diversion.
Thank you. And I believe that I accidentally skipped you last time to begin the question, so we'll start this next one with you, Representative Guggisberg. Question states, I work in a local daycare infant room. How would you ensure quality and safety of care for children, particularly infants, if the ratios are increased as proposed in House Bill 1422?
I don't remember what the exact ratios went to, but I know it came to the House as a very good bill, sponsored by Representative Hawken from Fargo here. And when it went to the Human Services Commission, Representative Porter from Bismarck amended it quite drastically to allow the number of kids in a daycare to go up quite a bit. Now, I understand the Senate's working on it, and they're going to increase the funding and possibly address the number of children watched by a daycare provider. And also, I think it's important, an important part of that bill is to make sure that we have a rating system so parents know what type of child care they're getting, and that somebody qualified to measure that is looking at it. So those are two important parts of the bill. Hopefully we will see it again, and hopefully it's in better shape when it comes back from the Senate, because I don't think the House did the right thing there.
Thank you, Representative Koppelman.
Thank you, Jolene. On this bill, I don't have as much of depth of expertise. I didn't have the opportunity to be on the committee that looked at this. But in its general terms, I think this was in reaction to some of the demand out west and the lack of child care providers that there were. And they were trying to look at a way where if there's no child care or an option where they can allow more child care within the existing facilities, I think this was their solution. Whether this is the best solution or not, I don't know. One thing that I think is important is that we do take a look at what a safe number is. That might be more than what we've allowed in the past and maybe less than what's proposed. I don't know. But we need to make sure that we look at that. I think also we need to be able to allow the market some flexibility in this as well. If I'm a parent and I'm looking for a daycare facility for my infant, and one daycare facility offers a lower ratio of those that watch the infants to the number of infants, I may choose that daycare over another one that uses a higher ratio. Maybe a rating system like Representative Guggisberg has suggested, maybe that's an option for determining how many that individual daycare facility, what ratio they use. But I don't claim to have the perfect answer on that. The bill as a whole, seem to have some answers, and if they need more work in the Senate, we'll see them again.
Thank you, Senator Barry.
Yes, and again, this is an issue, again, as you heard from the panel, one the state is starting to get involved with. There's no question this is a major, major problem, and it's only getting bigger. There was a bill passed through the Senate this year, I think over on the House side now, that addresses giving the ability for school districts to apply for grants and then be able to start to set up some preschool, if you will, or start to fund an ongoing situation for pre-K education. And I think that's going to also help out as it relates to parents with children as these start to develop. Also, as it relates to even moving down further than that, you know, trying to develop and interpret the state's appropriate role in this is, I think, this is being felt out right now, as is mentioned. There's initial plans put out. What is the right number as it relates to numbers of ratios of parents to, or excuse me, of caretakers to children? What is the state's role in contributing money toward those ends? Those are all going to be discussed. And again, in my experience, what happens is as they start, you're going to see differing thoughts. They'll move together. Ultimately, when they come up with a bill, I do think you'll see something come forward. When it's all said and done through conference committee, that will be a good starting point that looks at these very issues. Obviously, the safety of the children is of paramount importance to the state, and I think you'll see that reflected in what's ultimately brought forward.
Thank you, Senator Nelson.
Have to tell you a little story. The head of the Finance and Tax Committee in the Senate was bemoaning the fact one day that his grandchildren were coming for the weekend, and he and his wife had total control over them for the weekend. And they were small, and they were twins. And how was he going to survive? So I asked him on Monday. He said, I lasted a half an hour, and I told Shirley I'm going to the office. I had 3 children under 3. I cannot imagine having a ratio of 1 to 5 for children 18 months and younger, or 1 to 7 for 3 years and younger. You've got to be really young and really active and really into it to be able to handle competently that many children on your own. And that's all I have to say about the bill.
Thank you. Representative Boucher.
Thank you. You know, I think it's laughable that a solution that was presented to our childcare crisis was to warehouse them, to put children
I'm gonna ask the audience to please not respond.
in a facility,
Thank you.
know, where they're not supervised, or there's limited supervision. And so I certainly hope the Senate fixes those ratios. And this really comes down to, we have industry professionals out there, Child Care Resource and Referral, and other groups who have stepped forward and said they know what's best for these children. This is their profession. And I think while we're trying to determine what our role is in the state in supporting this and recognizing that this is a crisis we need to address, we need to be listening to those people. We shouldn't be offering these amendments on our own because it's an idea that we have and that's going to solve the problem. I think we need to do a better job of listening to the people who work in these fields and who are doing this work on a daily basis. And we have to address it from a variety of things. It's not just, right now there's some good bills out there as far as providing infrastructure grants for child care centers. There is some money that's being introduced as far as grants that can go to school districts so they can start programs if they wish, partnering with other programs that they already have. But the other thing is we have to look at the demand as far as professionals in the field. It's limited. People in childcare average $22,000 a year. And so for us to say that you have to be responsible for 5 infants while you're making $22,000 a year, I think is laughable. Representative Strinden from Grand Forks introduced a bill that didn't make it very far, but that would have helped provide loan buyback, student loan buyback for people that go into the profession, similar to what we do for science, engineering, math, and technology. We recognized that there was a need for these people out in North Dakota in science, engineering, math, technology, so we offered some opportunities to help them out to get a start. I think this is an opportunity we could have done for our child care providers and early childhood educators as well.
Thank you, Representative Carlson.
Well, this is as I listen to all the answers to the questions I'm trying to sort out in my mind, what is the role of government in this issue? Is it to own and establish and pay for and hire the people that run these daycare centers? Or is it to create an environment, to create loans for them, to expand that, to let the private sector fill those gaps, to provide grants and loans? And grants, by the way, there's $5 million in the governor's budget, which I'm sure anybody that's received one for expanding their daycare has thought was a pretty darn good idea. So what is the role of the government in this? The original bill came through, they would have been state employees, and we would have been having state-run daycare. I'm sorry, but I don't think that's the solution to this situation. And I think we need safe regulations to make sure that these ratios are correct. And I'm not familiar enough with the bill to know whether it was 12 to 1, 4 to 1, 5 to 1. But I can tell you that's the responsibility of the state, is to make sure that when these are established, that they are a safe place for those kids to be. Not necessarily that the state should own them and run them. And there will be a difference among us on that, because when a new $15 million program, when we've already got grants and things available for these daycare centers to expand and to be able to have better conditions for these kids, it's important. But it also cannot be separated from the pre-K debate. Because when you get into the pre-K debate, is it the public school's responsibility to have and start a pre-K system? And we're saying that yes, it is, but it should be a local decision, and those people should be able to vote on it in their community if they want to have it, and if they have the classroom space to house it. So this debate, we sensationalize things, and I'm not sure I would call it a crisis. I think it's a situation that needs to be addressed. But I think that we as a state government cannot stand and take over all these places and say that now we're going to be the solution.
Thank you. The next question, we'll start with Senator Berry. Combining a couple of questions, what's your position on requiring an ID to vote? And there's a statement, in rural North Dakota counties, the driver's license division is only open 1 day per month. How can we expect senior citizens to drive 40 or 50 more miles to get an ID to vote?
Well, this is, that topic is actually before our committee right now, Government and Veterans Affairs, as to, that's one of the, there's several different election measures being put forward. But as it relates to an ID to vote, I do support having an ID to vote. I think that's an important thing there. We require IDs in our society for virtually everything we do. You know, there's so many things. You can't cash a check without an ID. You're basically asked for this, and this doesn't have to be a photo ID. This can be, they're going to offer at no charge a government-issued non-photo ID. Your driver's license, obviously, will pass for this. But again, this can be obtained free of charge. So many times we look at problems going forward with the way things are today. You mentioned the restrictions or the possible difficulties of rural folks. Well, if and when, initially in 2005, when ID was being placed into the requirements for voting, there was pushback. Now it's pretty much expected as folks go to the poll that they have some form of ID. Now, requiring a government-issued ID in this case is something that there will be changes that will make it easier, and believe me, that the department will make it such that transportation will get out there. They will make it available so that people who need those IDs in these rural areas and areas that may not have that ability now, that'll change. They do certain things currently where they bring out temporary, if you will, on wheels type situations where they're going to come out and visit so that whether it be elderly citizens in rural areas or the disabled, they're going to make it more available so that people will be able to obtain those IDs, and then they can use them to vote, and they can use them for many other things that you need an ID for to get along in this society.
Thank you. Senator Nelson.
Thank you. This is Bill 1322. For those of you who like to look up numbers, it was amended in GVA yesterday, I think, and passed out 5-2 with a do pass. I was one of the 2 for a do not pass. Several weeks ago, I was over at one of our retirement homes. 2/3 of the people in the retirement home did not have a government-issued ID card. And the staff said with the work that they would need to do, it would probably take past the 2014 election to do it. We did not put an implementation date on it for past, so it would have to be done immediately. We had people come in from a region like described in the question. The bus runs on, the place where they can get the ID is open the first Wednesday of the month. The bus runs from her community to that community on the second and fourth Wednesdays of the month. If she can get a ride there, then is she there between 9:20 and 3:30 when it's open? All of the things that, and then she'd have to buy a meal, and she'd have to pay for the gas, and she'd have to do all these things, and it would take almost a full day. And she was born here in North Dakota, and she's 85, and she doesn't know where her birth certificate is, and all of these things that you need to get that government ID. I think it's a nightmare. I think what we have, we're rated as one of the top states in the nation on how to vote and the way we vote, and I think we don't need to muddy the issue.
Thank you, Representative Boucher.
I voted against the bill when it was in the House, and I really think, similar to what Senator Nelson said, we don't have a problem with voter fraud right now. So trying to find a solution that potentially will hinder, as in the examples that Senator Nelson said, or our college student population, or other populations, I think we have a variety of different ways that people can present information. If they bring their ID, great, that's the preferred method. If you don't have your ID, bring your water bill that has your address on it that's issued by the City of Fargo. If you don't have that, you can sign an affidavit, and then the county auditor will work with it on that. I don't think there's a problem with voting in our state. We actually, Minnesota and other states are starting to look at how we run our voting operations, and it's worked well, and the auditors are against this, and they say the system that we have works just fine.
Thank you, Representative Carlson.
Well, I can tell you that last election, and the reason this came about is because we have a process called affidavits. Last election, there were 10,800 affidavits filed, which means you didn't have any identification with you, so you brought that affidavit along, and when you signed that affidavit that you do live somewhere in the district, we counted your ballot without really even knowing if that was you and if that was your residence. Now, I don't care, but a logical person would tell you that if you cannot prove it and we count the ballot, the least you should do is hold the ballot until we know that person lives there. We had a U.S. Senate race settled by 3,000 votes, and we counted 10,800 ballots that we weren't sure the people lived there, and we put them in the ballot box. Now, they shouldn't be denied the right to vote, but we are trying to make a system that's free. Now, we can go to the one extreme and say this little group of people, and there are some of them that don't have it, but like Senator Berry said, you can't even get on an airplane or cash a check without an ID. And let me tell you, if we want to, we'll make it available, so we'll go to those sites and we'll help those people get it because we offered to do this free. And it's nothing more important in this democracy than to have an honest and fair voting system. And I think by having some type of an ID that says who you are and where you live, the campuses already have IDs. We just need to work with them to get the addresses put on them. You don't go to the food service without your ID. You don't get a book without your ID. So it isn't that we can't solve this very easily. To have a very simple system, it's no poll tax. We're doing it for nothing. I think it makes sense to know that when someone's ballot goes in the box, that ballot was counted and it was accurate.
Thank you, Representative Guggesberg.
Thank you. Whenever we have issues like this that I'm not necessarily an expert at, I'd like to ask the experts, and in this situation, the experts are the county auditors, and they say there's no problem with this. So it's obviously just a way to complicate voting, and if voting is one of our most important rights, I don't think we should try to complicate that. And like Senator Nelson said, especially for the elderly, this is going to make it difficult for them, and the more difficult it makes them, the more likely they are to not vote. And I think we should respect them. I voted against this bill, and I hope the Senate does too.
Thank you, Representative Koppelman.
Thank you. Well, first of all, the Secretary of State favored this bill. And one of the provisions that they worked hard on the amendments in the House to this bill were that those in nursing homes, retirement facilities, things like that, that there was a way to do verification either by the state coming to them or by mail. So it wasn't a matter of they had to drive to the DMV or other places to get an ID. I think at the fundamental of this, we owe it to all the people who vote and vote legally to make sure that all the votes are cast legally. Because if we're going to allow people to vote that we can't verify, that theoretically could cancel out somebody's vote who is legal and has ID and has proven that. there was various ways in our Government and Veterans Affairs Committee that were looked at. I think there was 3 bills that dealt with this on different methods to go about identifying voters. And some of them had provisions where you'd have to pay for an ID. Others just strengthened the system we have now and worked with student IDs to make sure that they had the proper information to be used for those that are voting away from home on what's on their driver's license, also those with the retired individuals. I think that it's not unreasonable to expect people to be able to show that they are a resident. We had some auditors that came in and said that they actually don't like the system in its entirety that we have now. Now, they didn't all endorse this option to fix it, but they said a big problem is if somebody fills out an affidavit, they send a green card to their house. And if the green card doesn't come back, they assume the person's legitimate. Now, there's no reconciling who received the card. If the card was received, if it goes to an apartment building, they just assume the person is a resident. They don't even verify it because it's too hard. So this needed to be dealt with in some fashion. This bill may not be perfect, but I do believe that the end result is going to be a more solid and trustworthy voting system.
Thank you. We are going to take a short 5-minute break. We have a lot of questions to get to, some issues that we haven't addressed yet, and we will get there when we come back. So, thank you.
That's not
All right, thank you.
I know.
Now, am I correct that
You just
we're going to
spelled
start
out
with
that.
Senator Nelson?
I think so.
Okay. What is the status on the Medicaid expansion? And it lists House Bill 1362.
As far as I know, it's still in Senate Human Services. I know that Senator Lee from West Fargo, who chairs that committee, is working hard on it, and I can't give you any further advance on what's going on with that bill.
Thank you, Representative Boucher.
Medicaid expansion through Obamacare or PPACA or whatever you want to call it, it was voted out of the House with, I think, a small majority. It was pretty evenly split. But what it did, the House Human Services Committee did put an amendment on there that does sunset it in 2017, I believe. Because right now what happens is federally, the federal government will pay 100% of the Medicaid expansion, and then it's 95% in, I believe, 3 years. And then sometime after that, it goes down to 90%. So the state, by us voting for it, we have put in saying that, potentially in 2017, we'll pick that on. Can you hear me? All right.
No.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. So in 2017, we'll have that conversation again because the funding will, or the approval of accepting those dollars will sunset, and the legislature will have to decide at that point if it passes the Senate with that amendment.
Thank you, Representative Carlson.
It always makes me feel good when a Democrat calls it Obamacare. Because we were criticized for years if we'd mentioned that word at all. Because PPACA is kind of hard to remember. Obamacare is easier. The Medicaid expansion is a hotly contested issue among most of the states. It isn't free money. In case if you're wondering, they tell you it doesn't cost you anything, but we have a $9 million line item in our budget to handle some of the administration that goes with it. So it is not free. It was very mixed. I introduced the bill. I took it out of the Human Services budget and introduced it as a separate bill, and I spoke against the bill when I introduced it. But this is a big deal that needs to be discussed in open discussion. It passed the House with a sunset. Because if you understand a little bit about the bill, it's set up so that for the first few years of the program, it's 100% funded by the federal government. And then as the years go by, that percentage goes down. It goes to 90, 10, 80, 20. And at some point in time, the states are going to pay for all of that expansion. And there's a donut hole in there. There's a single white male segment that has not been covered. It's very complicated. So I would, not being a Medicaid expert, I would not begin to tell you all the intricacies of it. I can tell you from my perspective, there's going to be nothing affordable about the Affordable Care Act before we're done. So we need to proceed with caution on these. There have been various states that have accepted it. There have been various states that rejected it. Florida did what's similar to what we did. They said that if you take the money, if it ever changes from 100 to 0 match, that we're out. Well, we all know it's very hard to do that, but that's what the language says, that if we go out, if that match changes, we have the opportunity to get out of Medicaid expansion. There are those who will tell you that, that they're going to have to rob from Medicare funds to pay for the Medicaid expansion. I mean, it's a very moving target. I think we need to really be cautious as we proceed on this because it could be a huge encumbrance in years to come for the state.
Thank you, Representative Gugelsberg.
Thank you. Yeah, we passed this out of the House, and it was narrow, and most of the money is going to come from the federal government. I believe it covers people up to 138% of the federal poverty rate. And there is a sunset when the federal government starts to reduce. I'm glad Representative Carlson, depends on the Democrats. Some of us like Obamacare, some don't. But
The term.
the term. We all, yeah, I like Obama. Let's make that
Oh,
clear.
that's a good one. I write that down. That's on my sheet now.
But the things that it does, and it'll take years to find out exactly how it affects the cost of health care. There's been a lot of misinformation out there. I just seen a video yesterday with a representative from Minnesota saying that it's going to kill people and had no information to back that up. But anyway, another bill that came into the House and was amended into another bill would have given $20 million for debt in hospitals. So when you ask the people, well, where's all this debt coming from? It's coming from uninsured workers. And a lot of them are up in the oil patch. And, the employer will say you can either have, health insurance or housing or something like that, so they don't get health insurance. And some of them, and not all, that's not where all this debt came from, but a lot of them will go into the hospital and give a false name and then skip out without paying their bill. So it is important that we try to get everybody health insurance so they can get the coverage they need, and also take care of some preventative things so it doesn't take so long in the long run. And this will help with that. For low income, and this, 138% of the federal poverty rate isn't nothing, so most of these people are working.
Thank you, Representative Koppelman.
Thank you. And as far as the status on Medicaid expansion, I think everybody's covered that pretty adequately. If the Senate moves forward with it, it will be in place in North Dakota. I know some of the discussion about Medicaid expansion had to do with whether or not the federal funds would continue. We all know the federal money standpoint isn't the best, and they don't seem to have enough money to cover the programs they're into now. But there was also a lot of people that felt that if the Medicare funding was to go down, that this would be important. I didn't personally support the bill in the House. However, I think that the amendments put on the bill is a reasonable way to do it if it's going to be implemented.
Thank you, Senator Barry.
Well, again, as a practicing physician for 25 years, from the outset, it's been very apparent to me that, and I've commented many times, that we need a way to expand access to health care. And so many times individuals look at the healthcare system as this black box, difficult to access, and once in, where do I go? So some form, in some way, the good thing about the Affordable Care Act, it's causing us as a nation to look at healthcare, how we provide it, and it's made us come face to face with this. Now, like anything else, we're 3 years. We just went past the 3-year anniversary of the Affordable Care Act, and yet many of the rules are not even written yet. And this is what is causing the paralysis with employers and with governments going forward. We're not sure what is going to be mandated, what is not. And again, anybody making a decision on what they're going to do going forward, usually you want to know what are the consequences of if I do this, if I don't. And right now, we don't have that. And so this has been a moving target for a long time, and until it slows down and until we know where we're at, it's hard to fund. It's hard to decide. Now, currently, as mentioned before, the federal government's into a lot of things it can't pay for now. So ultimately, this expansion will be paid for by North Dakotans, whether it's the half or whatever % we're going to pay now, or when we ultimately pay off our debts to China. And so at some point, we have to determine health care, yes, we need to get that out to people. But we have to determine how are we going to do that and what is actually going to be affordable about the Affordable Care Act.
Thank you. The next question will start with Representative Boucher. We've received a large number. Oh, am I wrong?
No, you're fine.
Okay. Well,
I started a lot.
wouldn't be the first time.
I didn't want her to be missed.
We've received a large number of questions regarding abortion and reproductive rights. We're going to divide them into two. There have been a number of very strong statements in the questions. We're going to ask more broad questions, and if your question hasn't been asked, we please encourage you to follow up with the legislators. What is your position on the so-called personhood bill, and how do you think that legislation would impact couples undergoing in vitro fertilization and victims of sexual assault? And there was a comment from someone in the audience who has a daughter who was sexually assaulted and wanted to know about her rights as a person as well.
So yesterday was the big abortion day in the House. The week prior was in the Senate. So there's a total of 7 bills that I think, if I'm accurate, abortion-related, personhood-related, that have been introduced this session. 6 of them are still alive. Well, 5 are still alive. One was killed yesterday in the House. As far as personhood specifically, the voters are going to be able to decide in November 2014. The statement is, I don't have it specifically in front of me, but it's basically that we will protect, the state has an interest in protecting life at all stages of development. The biggest question there is, what does that mean? What does that mean for end-of-life care and hospice? What does that mean for organ transplants and so forth? The bill we killed, 2303, had a lot of different cutouts and talked about in vitro and talked about end-of-life and so forth, but that was the bill we killed. So the legislature did not define personhood. The voters will decide in November 2014. The question is, how do I feel about it? I will, at this point, plan to vote no in November of 2014. I feel that it's too vague. It's not specific, and we have to provide opportunities for people to make medical decisions with their doctors and within their own God. And for us to do that from a body of 94 people or 47 in the Senate, I don't think is appropriate. And right now, the Supreme Court says, abortion is legal, and we need to make sure that there's access to safe legal abortions in our state and in our country.
Thank you. Representative Carlson.
Well, you'll be able to tell immediately the divide here, because I don't call it Abortion Day at the Capitol. I call it Pro-Life Day at the Capitol, because it is a difference in how you view the issue. I've supported him for the last 20 years. I have a son who was born, that's adopted. It was born to a 16-year-old mother, and she chose life. And his 3 little kids come sit in my lap, and they'd have never been there if that choice would have been different. So there are 2 sides to the issue. The in vitro one we talked about yesterday at length did not pass. And that's a matter of, that's a very, some of us have very strong opinions on that, but the chamber did not believe that we should pass that bill forward. But on the other hand, it is our job. We're elected to go out there and make decisions. The 94 of us in the House and the 47 in the Senate are elected to make those decisions when they come across. They've been bills on these issues since I started in 1993. The issues haven't changed much. They're still the same debate. I am never personally afraid to let the people vote. If we put something forward to the ballot, those are the people that put us there. I'm never afraid to give them something, the opportunity to vote on. So I will always fall on the side of the life issues. And the people will, the one that seems to be the most contentious, the people will have every opportunity with all the lobbying on both sides to decide where they want to be on that. And you know what? When they speak, that's the issue.
Thank you. Representative Guggisberg.
Thank you. Yes, yesterday we did have 4 bills. Like both the previous speakers said, the personhood bill itself didn't make it through the House. That was probably what we were making national news for. It had been the most restrictive law in the country. That one failed. We did pass one to let the voters decide. I believe the language was something like North Dakota will protect life at all stages, but it didn't identify what life is. And so there's a lot of questions as to how that'll affect organ donations and end-of-life care and things like that. And it'll essentially let the legislature decide when life begins. And so I'll be voting no on that on the ballot in 2014. I voted against it yesterday. Another one we had was to restrict doctors that worked at, or say that doctors that worked at abortion clinics had to have admitting rights to a hospital. And it was interesting because on the floor of the house, we have a surgeon that's in the house, and somebody asked him if this would help because it was presented as the safety of the patient. And the surgeon was asked, would it help improve the safety for the patient as a surgeon? And he said, no, it wouldn't, because the patient could still go. If it was his clinic, the patient would go by ambulance to the hospital and get care from somebody who specializes in that type of care. I guess that's about it.
Thank you. And our second question is regarding that bill, too.
We haven't gone all the way through yet.
Yep, I know. I'm just stating for those of you that want to finish, we have a second question on that issue as well. So Representative Koppelman.
Thank you. As you've heard, what some are calling the personhood or the in vitro bill didn't pass the House. It's going to the voters. I voted for it, and that was probably the toughest bill to wrap your head around in terms of the individual working parts of it. I did quite a lot of research into in vitro and some of how that might change or might not change with that bill, as well as talking to a couple of very close friends of mine that went through the process. And they had talked with their physician who performed the service, and their physicians didn't see much of a change, with one exception. They said that if you were to destroy the embryos that you had created to implant after you'd had a successful pregnancy and didn't feel you needed them anymore, that would be the one main thing that would change. But in terms of the process of being able to use in vitro to become pregnant and to give birth, that would not be greatly reduced. So I voted for the bill, and I think one of the things that every legislator up here in our chamber has that's more important than anything is, I think that number one is to be truthful, and number two is to be consistent, and I'm consistently pro-life.
Thank you. Senator Barry.
Yes, and as it relates to the bills yesterday, I would like to specifically speak to Senate Bill 2305. That's the bill I was the prime sponsor of, the one that was referenced earlier by Representative Guggisberg. I would take a little bit of a different stand and opinion from what he had talked about. Now, that bill is a women's health bill. What that bill does is to put forward an ability for the state of North Dakota to be able to verify that, in fact, individuals who are going to provide abortion services or wish to in the state of North Dakota, that they, in fact, are qualified to do so. I use the example all the time. If you go out to the airport tonight, get on an airplane, you're going to fly to Los Angeles. You assume that the individual in that cockpit is, A, they can safely fly that aircraft, and B, they can safely fly it to Los Angeles. Okay? So women presenting for abortion services in the state need to be able to know that the individual that's going to be performing a procedure to perform that abortion, that in fact they can perform that procedure and that they can perform that procedure safely. Currently, we're being asked to trust but not be able to verify this, okay? And so the ability to have the privileges and credentialing at a local hospital, if they're able to obtain these, that would show that they in fact are qualified to do this, and that lets the state know. If you look at the last 3 years for which full data is available in the state, when they list complications, they list 3 complications in over 3,800 procedures. That would be a rate of about 0.07%. The low end of the national average is 3%. So they're asking us to believe somewhere between 30 and 50 times less complications. Now, again, that stretches credibility quite a bit. And all we're asking for is a way for the state to be able to actually verify, so that we're not being asked to trust and verify. All reported statistics are strictly what are out there. We have no way to verify this. This gives the state that opportunity to do so, and I think that's an important thing we can do, setting public policy going forward for the women of North Dakota.
Thank you. Senator Nelson.
Well, Senator Barry and I disagreed with this here and on the floor, and we both spoke to it on the floor. The abortion clinic in town has been in existence for 15 years. There have been 2 cases that had to be taken to the hospital. They were. The doctor who was performing the abortion worked with the doctors at the hospitals, and the problem was solved. They are extremely safe. They have a great safety record. to put the restriction on that they have to go to a doctor within 30 miles, I think for people out in the rural area would, where are you going to go? You're going to go to either the hospital that's up the street or down by I-94. That's the choices you have because there's no other hospitals within a 30-mile radius. I believe in consistency too, and I've had the same one for all these years. An abortion is a legal medical procedure. So is an appendectomy, a hysterectomy, and a vasectomy. We aren't putting our opinion in on those. We shouldn't be putting our opinion on this. I am not the patient. I am not her spouse. I am not her God. Government does not belong in the decision-making process.
Thank you. The next question is actually on admitting privileges for physicians. So if you've answered that question, you can pass or whatever you would like. States many physicians in Fargo don't have admitting privileges at Sanford, Essentia, or the VA, yet they can send their patients to facilities for care via the ER. Why is this law necessary? We're starting with Representative Carlson.
Well, I think Senator Berry handled that very well, and I think that that would be the reason, and that is the reasons I voted for the bill.
Thank you. Representative Guggisberg.
Thank you. I think I answered that question the first time, but so I'll answer the first question this time. Just one thing that hasn't been brought up yet, in a point made by the representative that sits next to me on the floor yesterday, he had a list of all the different religions.
It wasn't me, by the way.
It wasn't Representative Carlson. We don't sit next to each other. Close, but not next to each other. Anyway, he had a list of all the different religions, and when their religion told them life begins, and almost no religion is the same. And so by us saying that this is the date or the 20 weeks or whatever it is that life begins, we're essentially picking one religion and telling people that this is what we're going to do. Roe v. Wade is the law right now, and if we want to contest that, that's something we can do, and but it's going to cost a lot of money, and other states have tried and failed. So,
Thank you. Representative Koppelman.
Thank you. And I think, again, I'll echo that Spencer Berry probably answered, Representative Berry answered this particular question the way I would have. However, one thing that's been brought up is whether or not the government should ever take a role in banning any sort of a procedure or not, or even make a law in relation to how one acts. And one philosophy I've always held is that government should only intervene when the rights of one conflict with the rights of another. And I think in all these abortion bills, I think that's very clear, that we're looking to protect the right of one, and we can't say that the other one has supreme right over the unborn. And so I know we'll have disagreement probably till the end of time on that, but that's certainly how I feel. And I also don't think that making laws as to when life begins is necessarily condoning one religion or another. I think we're making the laws based on what we have information in front of us. We're using logic to determine that. And we're not saying that my denomination says it and yours doesn't, so that's going to be the state denomination in North Dakota. We're saying the logical conclusion we've each come up with is our position. And although there will be disagreement, I certainly stand by mine.
Thank you.
I have one other comment on that, being I didn't answer much before. He referred to the representative who talked about all the religion. There was one religion noticeably absent from his list, and that was the Catholic Church.
Thank you. Senator Berry, did you want to comment on the personhood bill?
Well, no, I just soon continue on here. Some things that maybe didn't get a chance to address. Courts have held from the beginning over the last 40 years that abortion is in fact a unique procedure, and that states have the ability and should regulate this procedure in a unique fashion. So yes, are there regulations that are placed around abortion services that may not be present in other healthcare issues? There are, but the courts have said that that is in fact not only something that they're able to do, but that they should do. The policy again, it's about setting forward good public policy. This is not aimed at anyone or anything in particular other than to set good public policy in place going forward. Now, we've had abortion service providers in Jamestown, in Grand Forks. We may have some in Williston, might not in the future. We don't know that. The goal is to put in place good public policy going forward so that the state has a way to assure that any individual that wants to provide abortion services in the state, that we can make sure that that is going to be quality care delivered to the women of the state of North Dakota. Now, it's long been known that continuity of health care really increases the chances for better outcome. And that's part of this. Individuals performing the procedures, they're aware of those unique procedures. They know the complications that arise and how to handle those. And therefore, their ability to follow a patient to an emergency room, admit, maybe go to the OR if necessary, that's very important to have that safeguard in place. Now, again, we've talked about that. It's often said the procedure, it was mentioned earlier about appendectomies and not getting involved with other medical procedures. It's often said abortion should be safe, legal, and rare. Well, think about that. Why rare? I don't hear anybody talking about appendectomies being rare. I don't hear anybody talking about gallbladder surgery being rare. Why rare? Obviously, it's recognized that there's something very special about this procedure.
Thank you. Senator Nelson?
Well, I think you heard my opinion on this before, but during the break, a couple of people asked me about why don't we get to vote on a lot of the bills that you guys pass? And why is just one of these being sent on to us? Well, it's because of the way the bill is written. It's a concurrent resolution that specifically says that it'll be submitted to the qualified electors of North Dakota in the general election to be held in 2014. And it has the specific wordage. The inalienable right to life of every human being at any stage of development must be recognized and protected. That's what you will be voting on in 2014. That wordage to be put in Article 16 of, Section 16 of Article 4 of the Constitution of North Dakota. So it's not just a law, it goes into the Constitution. There are other ways that you can do things. You can refer. That goes by petition. So the battle isn't over. And also on one of the bills that was passed yesterday in the House, they amended it. That means it has to come back to the Senate. We may or may not like their amendment. It will be going to conference committee, and as Representative Carlson said, that probably start in a week or two. Some of us like to get out before the 80th day, so I'm hoping that they start as soon as possible. But my seatmate has a child that was born with a surrogate parent. They have a lovely daughter who's graduating this year. He had 4 leftover embryos. When the company was saving the embryos moved out of state, he was asked what to do with them. He had them destroyed. He's Catholic. He wonders if he's guilty of murder under this bill. Think about it.
Thank you. Representative Boucher.
Thank you. In regards to the Admitting Privileges Bill 2305, I voted against it. And part of that is, I mean, we talk about logic and how we use logic and common sense or when we make our votes. And, you know, Senator Nelson referred to the fact that the clinic, the provider here in town, in the last 15 years has only had to refer 2 patients to an emergency room or to another medical facility. In order to get admitting privileges, a physician needs to admit a minimum of 10 patients a year. So what we're saying essentially is that in order for someone to perform an abortion at the clinic, they would need to admit 10 patients a year, which would show that they're not doing their job as well as they have been doing it the last 15 years. I think once again it's been safe here in our state. They have you know, I think it's once again laughable to think that we don't know if doctors know what they're doing and that women have not made this decision. You know, this isn't something that people just in the middle of the night decide I'm going to go get an abortion. This is a decision that, like many other medical procedures, you sit down and you talk with your family and you talk with your physician and you spend a lot of time on this. And as a man, I'll never make that decision. Once again, I think it's inappropriate when we're making those decisions for other people.
Thank you. The next question will start with Representative Guggisberg. What regulations are being developed to monitor oil companies' disposal of waste?
We've had a couple of bills dealing with this in the House. One was to study
We haven't
What-
seen any of those.
One was to study reclamation processes in oil country, and that one was defeated. And I think it would be a good thing for us to study. I understand from people who pay attention that we do have some good reclamation laws, but it's still not a bad idea to study those and make sure that they're working. There is some funding, I don't remember exactly how much it is, but there is some funding to increase the amount of money that goes into a fund to help with reclamation. They're having a lot of issues out in the oil patch with, you know, like a truck driver who's carrying salt water, and he'll just open up he or she, I guess, will open up the gate and let the salt water run out right on the road. There's leaking pipes going on. And you know, with the pipes, they can usually find out who's responsible. With the oil wells, they're able to tell who's responsible. But when we got people just dumping stuff in the ditches, we need some money set aside to take care of that issue. So I think it's something we're going to have to keep an eye on and make sure that our laws are strong enough as we go into the future.
Thank you. Representative Koppelman.
You know, I think everybody in the legislature agrees that it's important for the oil companies and those contractors that work for them to follow the law in how they do their business. And I know that there's been talk of changing some of those laws and some study to do so. I think generally speaking, the instances we've heard about in terms of abuses have been people that aren't following the laws that we have now. Maybe we should make them more strict, maybe we shouldn't, but I do believe the biggest problem that we are facing with our rapid growth is probably the enforcement of those laws. And I'm certainly interested in seeing our state maintain still be a beautiful state in years to come. And I think reclamation is important. But I'm not an expert in any changes that might need to be made to those laws.
Thank you. Senator Barry.
Yes, and again, as it relates to Senator Nelson and I were just speaking, we have not seen those bills in the Senate, and I think one was killed, I guess, on the House side, and that's probably why. But again, as it relates to how we work at harvesting our energy resources in the state of North Dakota, that's very important. And that's something that I think all of the citizens, we want to do it responsibly, we want to be able to do it effectively, we want to do it in a way that it benefits all. And again, obviously, the 17 oil and gas producing counties that have a lot of the impact as it relates to the increased traffic and increased populations and just a variety of, they have some special things they're dealing with, just as it does affect the rest of our state. So I think most, if not all, North Dakotans would agree we need to do this in a very responsible fashion. And will there be studies going forward? Are they in place? And are we currently looking at, watching how this is, how they're harvesting these resources? We are, and I think that will be ongoing. But I do think it's an important thing that we utilize these resources, because I think it's a great thing for the state and for the people. But also, we want to make sure we maintain the beauty of North Dakota and a lot of the natural, again, beauty that makes this state such a special place.
Thank you. Senator Nelson.
We talk about reclamation, but there's a whole lot of things that go on before that. And I think this is one of the problems we had, that the oil patch sprang up so quickly that we did not have in place the proper siting regulations, the policies, sample contracts even of what needed to be done. If you go up into Saskatchewan and you take a look by the side of the road and see the mess they have from the coal activity that's been up there, it's awful. They have just butchered their land up there. You see in North Dakota the reclamation that gets done by the coal industry and what they have to go to make the land back as it was. And if you've read Art Link's book about getting the land back to the way it was, we did not have sighting things in place. We have not seen anything dealing with reclamation yet, but I think that we did score a small victory last week when the oil company withdrew the petition to drill 200 feet from the parking lot at the Elkhorn Ranch. This should not be allowed to happen.
Thank you, Representative Boucher.
Regulation of waste or oil waste is not something I'll even pretend to know much about. One thing that I have learned, though, is I think we do need to look more, not maybe obviously how we regulate and work with the oil companies and the businesses out there, but making sure we have more teeth behind our policies and our laws. I continue to hear in industry, business, and labor, one of the committees I sit on, how sometimes it's just cheaper to pay the fine than it is to actually, take care of the waste that it should be. And the challenge there is that you have so many players out west. And so you have oil company A who has subcontractors, who has subcontractors, who have subcontractors. And it's a lot of times not oil company A that's causing the problem, it's the third subcontractor, and making sure that they're aware of our policies and laws. So I think there needs to be more done in that way. But, when we talk about reclamation, we're talking about the aesthetics of it. One thing that hasn't been addressed is our public health. Some with oil, there's chemicals for the fracking and so forth. And I'm not going to, pretend or that I know what those chemicals are or what they do, but we do know that they will have an impact on the health of our land, but also the health of us as people and the animals that we depend on for our food source. And so I would be an advocate that we'd spend some more time looking at what does that mean for North Dakotans in the long run, not just today, but 30 years from now.
Thank you, Representative Carlson.
The golden goose is oil. We're expecting $5 billion worth of revenue next biennium, $5 billion. There would not even be the discussion of major state participation in a diversion if it weren't for oil, because it's paid for by a portion of the oil tax. The Water Resources Trust Fund is funded by an oil tax. That went from $20 million to $550 million in one biennium. We wouldn't be talking about a $100 million commitment to the flood protection in the valley if it weren't for oil. We have, if you talk to experts in the field, they will tell you that we have the finest regulatory agency in the nation when it comes to dealing with oil and gas. Are there problems that go with that? Absolutely. I would disagree that we have had no rules on siting. I've been involved in the energy and in the tax committees for years, and we have very good policies dealing with siting and dealing with disposal of waste. Do you always have a few perpetrators? Yes, you do. But we are, in this budget, increasing people. We're adding more staff to the health department to monitor groundwater and to monitor the sites. We're adding more people in industrial commission for permitting. We're adding more people who will be on site making sure that those pads and those pits are properly designed and handled. There's only certain places you can dispose of your heavy metal waste. So we are doing a lot in this budget, including putting $4 billion, of which a majority of that money is going into the oil patch, to make sure that we address the impacts that are happening in that area. It's not the pretty West it used to be. Nobody can argue about that, because oil wells, when you have spacing at 1280s and you could have 8 wells on that 1280, it's not the same pasture that Grandpa had his cows in. But on the other hand, it is generating a tremendous amount of wealth, not only for the oil companies, but for every single mineral owner that owns that. When checks are going out at $10,000 and $12,000 a month to mineral holders, and they're paying income tax to the state of North Dakota, in which we're recycling that back into education and higher education and social welfare programs, the golden goose, all I can say from my perspective as a leader in the House is I hope it doesn't quit, because, boy, we're hooked on the money.
Thank you. Start with Representative Koppelman. What is being done to increase law enforcement presence in the western part of the state?
I know that there's been several bills that were introduced to deal with that, some of them more narrowly tailored, some of them more broad. But I think in the end, where we ended up was trying to send more money back to the oil-producing counties and giving them the resources to do that. I believe there was also some opportunities for grants in the area to help bolster law enforcement. But I think the the main feeling was that those counties where the oil production has increased and the population has increased and the traffic and those from out of state that are moving in there, that those counties would best know how to deal with their law enforcement and to manage it as long as they had the resources to do it. So I think there was a new formula put into place as to how those dollars were allocated back to those oil producing counties.
Thank you. Senator Barry.
Well, again, to echo some of the things that Representative Koppelman mentioned, definitely with the formula, there's a marked increase. In fact, I think almost double in terms of the money that will be going back to those oil-impacted counties so that they can make determinations as to where best to spend them. Again, locally, they're going to have a better idea of where they need and how they need and what to do with it. So if we help provide them with that capital that they can address these with, that's going to be to their benefit. Also, there was a bill that came through increasing judgeships in the state, of which I think a couple of them are going to be up in the oil-impacted areas. And so as to take some of the load, because obviously with more people moving into that area, there is more need for law enforcement and judicial decision-making. And so by increasing the judgeships, that's going to help cut down on backlog and help move things through further. There were increased highway patrol. I think last session there was increased highway patrol added. And so again, as they move forward, when you grow, there's growing pains. Some can be anticipated, some cannot. And you don't always know the extent to which those will be. The key is, it's like anything, we look at that in medicine. We see a patient, you evaluate them as to where we are today. We try to make a determination of what is best, enact that, and then we follow it and reevaluate it, maybe the next day, maybe the next week, see how things are going. And that's kind of what we're doing in this place. As it was alluded to earlier, this has come along very quickly. And in the last 5 years, this has really expanded. So to make the determinations as best we can at the time, and then make sure we follow it to say, is that enough? Is that the right thing? Do we need more of this, less of this? And I think that's going on. I think you're seeing that the state's taking a very active role in trying to help those areas out and be responsive to their needs.
Thank you. Senator Nelson.
Looking on our computers, we have an awful lot of bills listed under law enforcement. One of the first things that we did at the beginning of the session was to add money to the transport or the highway bills to allow for some decent roads out there. We've had a number of accidents. You look at pictures of those roads, there's no shoulders, they're gravel. They were built for farm vehicles. They weren't built for semis. We've had accidents where a semi has broadsided a car several times with young people in it. The city of Watford City has expanded, their population has exploded. There's a lot of things going on there. We have rumors of 2 gangs in the mafia moving into Williston. 2 murders in the oil patch last weekend. Yes, there's a need for law enforcement out there. And we did add a few people, but this is going to impact the cities and the counties as much as it does the state. They don't have the space to put them. They don't have the jails that will adequately handle these people. It's something that's hard for us to imagine because we're used to living here. We don't understand. It's almost a different mentality, I think, out there than it is here. But it is happening, and the pictures of some of the things out there they tell a very complete story. So yes, I think we need to make sure that they have proper resources for law enforcement and incarceration and help, social services if needed.
Thank you. Representative Boucher.
I really don't have anything dramatic or extra to add to what's been said. I mean, I think we recognize there's a need. The needs we're trying to be addressed as much as possible. Depending on the community, they're going to have their own unique needs, and so I think some of the funding that's coming through is allowing those communities to make those decisions, and we'll continue to see what other needs there are.
Thank you. Representative Carlson.
It is the Wild West out there. If you haven't visited, it's worth a trip headed out west to see the difference. First of all, be careful to have your seatbelt on and be driving slow because you're probably going to see more traffic than you've ever seen in Fargo. But we have made a $4 billion commitment. We have 15 new highway patrolmen in the budget to fill the needs out there. that goes along with the 9 we had, that we added last biennium. We have grants in this new 1358, which sits in the Senate, that has grants for EMS. It has grants for hospitals that are having trouble collecting debts on people they see as patients, but because these people can't be found, they're in a man camp or whatever, they have no way to collect. They mail them they'll mail out a stack this tall of invoices, and they'll get this many of them back. So we are trying to accommodate in as many ways possible, understanding that this area that we're taking the revenue from needs to get the revenue back. And the EMS, there's a request for more judges. We are just a long-term problem with the jails, but we also have problems with something that I would have never dreamt of, and that's airports. You know, most of the planes that want to fly into Williston and Minot are having a heck of a time. There's no hangar capability. There's no, if you've been there, it is not Hector. They're not much of a place for gathering to get people in and out. And these big jets with these companies are flying in on a regular basis. So we have grants in there for airports. We have EMS. We have sheriffs. We have money for hospitals. We're looking at judges, whether they need more judges. So this $4 billion package, let me tell you, it's so complicated that I challenge anybody here to explain it. Because when they do a spreadsheet, the money is like a Ouija board. But we're attempting as best we can to give them the flexibility, but also move the money to the west. At the same time, understanding that the farm-to-market roads in the valley were shot. We've had all the wet years, and you go down that Hankinson country, and they'll drive around 3 miles to get to their farm because they haven't had the money to build their culverts and their roads. So we're trying to pump money back into that as well. So the investment is coming back. There's going to be a tremendous investment in not only the oil patch, but the rest of the state on infrastructure.
Thank you. Representative Guggenberg.
Thank you, and I think we should add the highway patrolman, and I think some of the funding come out of the Highway Patrol Retirement Fund. Shot at Representative Gurchella in the audience. No, seriously.
I like that idea.
Seriously, I'm on the Government Operations Division of the Appropriations Committee, and so we hear all these bills. And most recently, we did hear the Highway Patrol budget, and they brought some videos with them, and they are seeing some very scary stuff out there. You know, I'm a firefighter, and we usually show up 3 or 4 on a truck, and an ambulance and a police officer is close behind us. These highway patrolmen are showing up to a bar fight with 20 people. One guy in a taser, you know, trying to take care of the situation. It's dangerous out there. We're adding to it, and we're adding some positions. I hope we can hold on to those 15 positions. They're requesting some money for a training facility in Bismarck. It's interesting listening to them talk. They used to train just shooting at a target, and now they're shooting through windshields and rolling and shooting, and because that's what they find themselves in for a situation. But and others have talked about, you know, it's not just law enforcement, it's not just judges, there's so many things. We had a bill, Minot or Ward County wanted some money for a jail. They have people sleeping on the floor in the cafeteria in their jails up there. So I think the bigger picture is, yes, we need law enforcement, but more importantly, we need to adopt a plan to deal with this. We have a plan for the highway system that we've adopted. We're funding things towards that plan. It's working well. We need to come up with a plan for infrastructure out west. We need to come up with a plan for public safety out west. So we're not just throwing some money at it every session, and then we'll see in 2 years and see how it worked out.
Thank you. We are going to go to Senator Berry for our 1-minute closing statements, please.
Well, again, thank you for having us this morning, and thank you for the audience for showing up and their questions. I just want to point out that in light of all that goes on in the legislature, and there's a lot, it happens very quickly, I don't want us to lose sight of the fact that North Dakota, right now, the quality of life in this state is among the best in the nation. The national publications look at our state. We are consistently ranked at near the top for overall quality of life. Business publications look at us, and we're consistently in the top 3 to 4 states in terms of a business environment. which is what government is to do, is set in place good public policy that is business-friendly, that helps our economy. And as a result of that, our unemployment rate is 3.2%. It's been the best in the nation for a long, long time. And that's because of that business economy that we've been able to put forward. It's allowed the median income in this state to rise faster than any other state in the union. Okay? We've come up more than anyone else. And also the tax relief that we've mentioned. We not only fund the priorities, but we're going to be bringing back a tax relief package in the neighborhood of over $1 billion when other states in this nation are increasing taxes throughout predominantly. So we have a lot to be proud of in this state, and continuing to move forward and govern in the fashion that we are, I think, is really in our best interest. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Nelson.
Well, thanks to the league and thanks to my colleagues who are sitting out in the audience. I like to do that too and find out what's going on with the other house, because we don't have time to get over there and listen to all of the discussions that are going on. So I think it's very helpful. And I hope it's been helpful to the people who are here. Before we started the session, some of us got together and thought, what is our main goal? What are we looking for? What do we want to accomplish this session? And one of the things that came through a lot was that we wanted to make sure that we left a state that would allow for the future of our kids. And I think we've been trying very hard to work for the betterment of this state. So there is a state when our kids and their kids want to come here and live. Some of us, our kids have left, but they want to come back. And lately, I've been hearing a few times that I'm not going to move back because some of the circumstances that have happened this session. I hope that doesn't happen. Some of us are I think all of us are working with what we believe, but I guess I just believe things a little bit different than some of the rest of these folks here. And thank you for your support.
Thank you. Representative Boucher.
Also, I'd like to thank the league and all of you for attending. I'm continuing to learn and enjoying the experience being out there and representing part of North Fargo. You know, one of the interesting things when you go into the legislature, you know, we have our election in November, and then we have our organization session the first week of December, and then we start in January. So you go from campaign mode, where you're competing, to a mode where you're trying to work together and build relationships. And that's one of the biggest things I've learned out there, is that it's really about relationships. Probably around 90% of the bills we vote on are pretty unanimous, are pretty agreeable. You know, we end up talking a lot of times about the things that we don't agree with, which is important as well. So I encourage you to build relationships with your elected official and to spend time visiting with them about issues that are important to them. I know I continue to receive emails from constituents, and I enjoy interacting and hearing from you all as far as what's important to you.
Thank you. Representative Carlson.
Well, thank you for having us. This is always good to interact and get back home to the real people that when we come home, we live under the same rules you do. And Representative Boucher is right. Our job, philosophically, there's always going to be differences between the parties. But you should disagree on the policy side of it, not the personality side of it. And have your disagreements, get it over with, and then shake their hand and go have a beer with them later. I mean, that's the way business should be done in North Dakota. Senator Berry talked about some of the things that North Dakota's accomplished, and I don't share Senator Nelson's concern that people won't come back because what we've done. But when we look at we're rated number 2 in the nation in the Entrepreneur Index. We're the fastest growing population state in the nation. We're number 1 in job creation by the Gallup survey. We're number 1 in economic growth by the U.S. Bureau of Economic Analysis. Our GDP is up 120% from 2000. Something must be going pretty right here. Something's going right, and it's not just oil, it's agriculture, it's technology, it's manufacturing. We have a very diverse economy that's doing well in North Dakota because we've taken a very simple policy. The state has one responsibility, and that's to make sure it has reasonable regulation and it has the opportunities for businesses to grow. And because of that, our state's doing well, and I think we have a lot to be proud of. By the way, I'll be happy to stick around afterwards if people want to talk about where the status of the amendments are and where things are on the on House Bill 1020, the funding for the diversion. I'll be glad to do that.
Thank you. Representative Gukasberg.
Well, thank you, and thanks again to the League of Women Voters and everybody for showing up today to let us inform you on what's going on in Bismarck. I also agree that, you know, we want to make this a place where people want to live, where families want to come to live. And I've heard from a lot of people that, you know, moved away from North Dakota and now come back because there is economic opportunities here. But we need to make sure that they want to stay, not just to work, but they want to stay here to live because of the environment we have and places to recreate and things like that. A few people have mentioned the tax cuts, and I'm kind of surprised we didn't get into taxes today. You know, we work off the governor's budget, and so the governor comes out with a budget, and then we amend it up or down and based on our priorities. And of those tax cuts, the majority has $386 million extra dollars going to income and corporate financial institution tax cuts. And they only raised the property tax cuts $8 million. So that's something, you know, none of this is done. The majority leader says all the time that, you know, we're $844 million in the hole, and that'll all, as we get into the third quarter, will work itself out. But I think we need to concentrate more on property tax cuts, and that might mean giving up some other things that we've passed.
Thank you. Representative Koppelman.
Thank you, and thanks for all of you for coming. You know, I think there's some goals that we should all be sharing out in Bismarck, and some of the ones that I wrote down here I'll share with you is that we ensure that the state spending is sustainable and appropriate. We all talked about that we need to have help for water projects and oil impact. I think we need to fund education in an equitable and sustainable way. We need to give back money to the taxpayers, those that have paid the taxes, and lower rates so that we don't collect more than we need. We need to offer reform to the property tax system that would ensure affordability going forward. And finally, we need to maintain a positive business climate so that our economy will continue to grow. I think all of us up here want to see North Dakota succeed. I think we want to see people that have moved away come back, and those that are growing up here and going to school here stay. And I think we all need to make sure that we do our best to ensure that we have a good North Dakota or a great North Dakota tomorrow for those that follow us. So again, thank you all for coming. Thanks to League for hosting, and I'll be happy to answer any questions afterward.
Thank you. In closing, I just want to quickly recognize some of the other legislators that were with us this morning. Senator Ole Larson, Representative Joel Heilman, Representative Ben Hansen, Senator Tim Flackel, Representative Ed Grishella, and Senator Tony Grimberg. Did I miss anyone? All right. Again, I want to thank the legislators and the audience for joining us today, the City of Fargo and the League members for helping out. Sorry we could not get to all of your questions, but we encourage everyone to continue to have a dialogue with your legislators. And with that, we'd just like to give everyone a hand for participating today.